The dust settled around her worn boots, a swirling veil against the fading light of the train station. She was pregnant, alone, and the train that brought her from Boston was already a distant whisper of steam against the prairie wind. Her father, a man whose word was as brittle as the dry earth, had promised her passage, a new life, but then he hadn't. Instead, a letter had arrived, curt and cold, telling her she was to be married upon arrival. She was just 19, with a child in her belly that wasn't yet a burden, but felt like an anchor dragging her down. Then, a man approached, his shadow long and lean in the evening sun. Elias Vance. A widower, they said. He offered her $50 for the ticket back east, but it wasn't about the money. He looked at her, truly looked, and asked her permission first. The shame clawed at her throat, a bitter taste. He didn't know the truth. Not yet. Before we get into this tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And subscribe if you want more content like this one. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible dip of her head. What else could she do? Her options were a void, a bottomless pit of destitution and public judgment. He was a stranger, tall and quiet, with lines etched around eyes that seemed to hold a sorrow as deep as her own. His name was Elias Vance, a rancher from the outlying plains, a widower with a young daughter. He had simply appeared, as if summoned by her silent desperation, presenting a solution that felt both horrifying and merciful. The arrangement, brokered by a distant cousin, was a marriage of convenience. She was to be his wife, a mother to his child, and in return she would have a roof over her head, a name, and a chance to escape the whispers that followed her from the city. The transaction felt stark, brutal even, yet his gaze held no contempt, only a quiet weariness that mirrored her own. She carried a secret, a heavy stone in her heart that felt too big for her small frame. The pregnancy was obvious enough. Soon it would be impossible to hide, but the circumstances of it, the betrayal that had sent her fleeing, that was the true weight. She swallowed, the dry air scratching her throat. This was her only choice, a fragile plank across a chasm. She had to believe in his kindness, even if it felt like a gamble with her very soul. The station master watched them, his expression unreadable, a silent testament to the small town's watchful eyes already assessing her. The dust in the air seemed to hum with unspoken questions. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. She was here, a stranger, a burden, but she was here. His wagon was sturdy, well-maintained, not the rough-hewn cart she might have expected. It spoke of a man who took care, even in his solitude. The ride from town to his ranch was long, the landscape stretching out, flat and endless under the bruised twilight sky. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but rather a vast, echoing space. Sarah clung to the sides of the wagon, her knuckles white, the jostling of the wheels doing little to ease her churning stomach. She glanced at him, Elias, sitting tall on the driver's seat. His profile was sharp, his jaw set, but his hands, calloused and strong on the reins, moved with a surprising gentleness. He didn't speak of her past, or the life she left behind, or even the future they were supposedly building. He simply pointed out a distant ridge, a cluster of trees, as if easing her into this new, wild country. She felt a profound sense of dislocation, like a piece of driftwood washed ashore on an unfamiliar beach. This new life, this desolate beauty, was a stark contrast to the cramped, gossip-filled alleys of Boston. She was trading one cage for another perhaps, but this one promised air, space, and a chance to breathe without suffocating under the weight of her shame. When they finally arrived, the ranch house stood squat and solid against the darkening horizon, a single lamp glowing in a window like a lonely eye. It was small, but clean, the scent of wood smoke and dried herbs clinging to the air. Elias helped her down, his hand firm on her elbow, and led her inside. A small girl, no older than 4 or 5, appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide and curious. "Lily," Elias said, his voice softer than Sarah had yet heard it. "This is Sarah." Lily clutched a worn rag doll to her chest, her gaze flicking from her father to Sarah, then resting on Sarah's swollen belly. There was no judgment in her eyes, only an innocent inquiry that pricked Sarah's heart. Elias introduced her as his intended wife, the words sounding foreign, yet true. In the small, quiet room, Sarah offered a tentative smile, her own exhaustion a heavy cloak. She watched as Elias knelt to embrace his daughter, a tenderness in his movements that surprised her. This was the family she was to join, a family built on loss and a desperate need for a new beginning. The weight of her secret, the truth about the child she carried, pressed down on her, an invisible burden. Would this fragile new connection break under its pressure? She prayed for safety, a silent plea in the depths of her soul. The next few days were a blur of quiet adjustments. Sarah took on the tasks Elias set for her: cleaning, cooking, tending to Lily. Lily was a quiet child, her grief for her lost mother a palpable, silent presence in the house. Sarah found herself drawn to the little girl, sensing a kindred spirit in her own unspoken sorrow. They would sit by the window, watching the vast plains, and Sarah would tell her quiet stories of the city, simple tales of birds in the park or children playing hopscotch. Elias watched them, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher in his eyes. He was always working, his days long and arduous, yet he was always present, a solid, dependable anchor in the quiet rhythm of their days. He never pressed her for details of her past, never mentioned the unspoken truth of her advanced pregnancy. His silence was both a comfort and a constant reminder of the secret she held. Each day she felt the new life within her grow, a living clock ticking down to the moment her truth would be laid bare. She worried about community judgment, the whispers that would inevitably follow her from town once the news spread. The town already knew Elias had taken a new wife, a woman who appeared unexpectedly. Sarah felt like an open book, yet the most important pages were still unread, hidden away. She longed for a sense of belonging, a place where she wasn't simply tolerated, but truly seen. But how could she be seen when she was hiding so much? Her desperation wasn't weakness, she told herself. It was the raw instinct of a trapped creature fighting for air. One evening, as a sudden spring storm lashed against the windows, shaking the small house, Lily woke crying from a nightmare. Elias was out, checking on the livestock, and Sarah was alone with the frightened child. She scooped Lily into her arms, rocking her gently, singing a lullaby her own mother had taught her. The child slowly calmed, her small hand clutching Sarah's dress. In that moment, a tentative connection formed, a quiet bond between two lonely souls seeking comfort. When Elias returned, soaked to the bone, he found them together by the embers of the fire, Lily asleep in Sarah's lap. He didn't say anything, but his gaze softened, a warmth entering his usually guarded eyes. That night, she felt a shift, a tiny crack in the walls she had built around herself. The storm outside mirrored the tempest in her heart, but inside, there was a fragile peace. She began to see Elias not just as a means to an end, but as a man of quiet strength and unexpected depths. She knew she owed him the truth, but the shame of it, the sheer magnitude of her deceit, held her captive. It was a burden she carried, heavier than the child growing within her. How could she risk the kindness he offered, risk the safety of this place, when the truth threatened to shatter it all? She often asked herself, what if he turned her away? What if he saw her for what she was, a ruined woman? The thoughts were a constant, nagging current beneath the surface of her new routine. The weeks turned into months. Sarah's belly swelled, a clear testament to her truth, and the town began to whisper. When she went to the general store, the women's eyes would linger on her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. Reverend Miller's wife, a woman known for her sharp tongue, made a point of asking about her family in Boston, with a pointed sweetness that felt like a barb. Sarah would offer vague answers, her heart pounding with a familiar sense of dread. Elias, however, remained steadfast. He would walk beside her in town, his presence a silent shield against the judgmental gazes. He never questioned, never doubted, at least not openly. This unwavering trust, undeserved as it was, began to chip away at her carefully constructed walls. She felt a growing need to unburden herself, to tell him everything before the truth was ripped from her by others. It was an emotional risk, one that felt like stepping off a cliff. But the kindness he showed her, the gentle way he treated Lily, the unspoken safety of his home, these things made the thought of deceit unbearable. She saw the scars of his own loss in his quiet demeanor, the way he sometimes gazed out at the fields, a wistful sorrow in his eyes. He understood pain, she realized. Perhaps he could understand hers too. One evening, as twilight painted the prairie in hues of violet and orange, Sarah found Elias sitting on the porch, staring at the distant mountains. She joined him, her heart thumping. "Elias," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." She took a deep breath, the confession a bitter taste in her mouth. "The child. It's not yours. I was forced. My father sold me, in a way. He made a deal, a marriage with a man I didn't know, a cruel man. When I resisted, he had his way. I ran away before the baby could be born into that life, before that man could claim it." The words tumbled out, raw and painful. She watched his face, expecting anger, disgust, anything but the quiet stillness that settled upon him. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I knew," he said, his voice low, steady. "Not the details, no. But I knew the child wasn't mine. And I knew you were running from something. I hoped you would trust me enough to tell me when you were ready." His admission stunned her. All this time, he had known, or at least suspected. And he had still offered her a place, a name, protection. The shame was still there, but now it was mixed with a profound sense of gratitude, a blossoming of something akin to healing. A few days later, the external threat they had silently braced for finally materialized. A letter arrived from the Boston solicitor, demanding Sarah's return, stating she was legally bound to another man, the brute who had ruined her. The letter twisted Elias's features into a grim line. "He means to claim you," he said, his voice flat. "And the child." Sarah's blood ran cold. The man, a distant relative of her father's, was known for his ruthless grip on what he believed was his property. The solicitor's words painted her as an absconded bride, a runaway property rather than a victim. It was a false accusation, a legal manipulation to control her. The fear was a tangible thing, a knot in her stomach, but this time she wasn't alone. Elias crumpled the letter, his eyes blazing with a quiet fury she hadn't seen before. "He won't take you," he stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. The threat escalated when a local sheriff, swayed by the solicitor's letter, arrived at the ranch, a stern look on his face. He spoke of runaway wives and broken contracts, his words laced with the community's thinly veiled judgment. He suggested Sarah return to Boston, hinting at trouble if she refused. Elias stood between them, a steadfast wall. "She is my wife now," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "And this is her home." Sarah felt a surge of strength, a sense of belonging she hadn't dared to dream of. She was no longer just running, she was standing, and Elias was standing with her. The confrontation with the sheriff was tense, ending with the sheriff retreating, but not without a warning of future trouble. The town simmered with the news, the whispers turning into outright condemnation. The reverend's wife spread rumors of Sarah's loose morals, claiming Elias had brought a scarlet woman into their respectable community. Sarah felt the sting of public shaming, the weight of their accusations pressing down on her. But Elias's loyalty was a shield. He didn't defend her to others. He simply lived their truth, his actions speaking louder than any words. He protected her, not with anger, but with unwavering quiet strength. Then, the earliest signs of labor came. The night was long, agonizing. Elias stayed by her side, his hand never leaving hers, his face etched with concern. He moved with a practiced ease, having seen a woman through childbirth before, a memory of his first wife, perhaps. In the early hours of dawn, a baby boy cried into the world. He was small, but healthy, a tiny beacon of new life. Sarah held him, tears streaming down her face, a raw mix of pain and profound love. This child, her son, was not a burden, but a testament to her survival, a promise of a future. Elias looked at the baby, then at Sarah, his eyes holding a depth of emotion she had never seen. "He's beautiful, Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick. The mirroring of her own initial helplessness in her newborn son, so tiny and dependent, solidified her resolve. She would protect him, just as Elias had protected her. She knew then that she was not broken. The following weeks were a delicate balance of recovery and quiet defiance. The town's judgment was a constant, low hum, but it felt distant, muted by the warmth within their small home. Elias didn't send word to the solicitor, nor did he entertain any further visits from the sheriff. They simply lived, day by day, building their family around the new life that had arrived. Sarah nursed her son, held Lily close, and watched Elias move through his days with purpose. The scars of her past remained, etched into her memory, but they no longer defined her. With Elias, she was more than her past. She was a mother, a wife, a woman finding her voice. He began to share stories of his first wife, not with sorrow, but with a gentle fondness, allowing Sarah to understand the depth of his own quiet pain and the healing he had found. Their bond deepened, forged in shared vulnerability and quiet trust. The moral tension between her freedom and her belonging dissipated. She realized that here, with Elias and the children, she had found both. She had chosen to stay, chosen this life, chosen them. And in that choice, she found a quiet triumph far more meaningful than any heroic escape. They had sacrificed conventional approval, perhaps, but they had gained something invaluable: true family. The seasons turned, and the little boy grew, his laughter echoing through the small ranch house. He had his mother's eyes, bright and curious, and his father's quiet demeanor. Not his biological father, but the man who had claimed him, protected him, and loved him without question. Elias taught him to ride, to care for the animals, to respect the land. Lily, older now, doted on her baby brother, a fierce protector. The family was complete, a haven against the world's harsh judgments. Sarah often stood by the window, watching them in the yard, a deep sense of peace settling over her. Her life was not what she had imagined, but it was richer, more honest, more beautiful than anything she had ever dared to hope for. The whispers from town still reached them sometimes, like distant winds carrying forgotten sorrows, but they no longer pierced her heart. She was anchored here, like the ancient cottonwood trees by the creek, roots running deep, weathering every storm. Elias would sometimes find her lost in thought, and he would simply take her hand, a silent affirmation of their bond. She was not broken, she had learned, but woven anew, stronger for the mending. She had come here, desperate and full of shame, but through the kindness of a stranger and the slow, arduous work of building trust, she had found safety, belonging, and a quiet, enduring love. Their life was a testament to resilience, a bittersweet resolution, a future built not on grand pronouncements, but on the enduring strength of quiet choices and unwavering loyalty.